Good afternoon, everybody. For those of us on the East Coast, good morning if you're on the West Coast. Just want to welcome you to today's eDesign Exchange. And the topic of today's exchange is we're going to be discussing some of the results of the survey that hopefully all of you took back in February. And there's a white paper that is going to be circulating soon. And we've just got some additional questions that come out of the results of the survey. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Camille Funk, the director of the UPCEA eDesign Collaborative, and we'll get going from there.
Awesome. And just so you know, Ed is recording this, and we typically record all of our sessions. So, and so I'm going to actually share my screen because I have a couple things I wanted to show you. And we'll just kind of talk through this because we've got some fun things that we're going to be sharing with the community based off of the survey that we had. So the first figure I'm showing you is here up on the screen. It's talking about how long you've been in your current role. And you'll see that the orange relates to team members and then the blue relates to team members. And so we've been finding that most people are a little bit young in their positions. So some of the questions I had and I wanted to kind of start off with that would be good for us to maybe kind of talk through is how long does it normally take for you to acclimatize to a new role on an ID team, and kind of maybe in addition to that is how long does it take for a team to gel? And I just wanted to get some of your feedback on that. Any thoughts?
This is Chris Atkins. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so I really think that it depends upon the experience of the people on the team. So if I'm on the team and I'm the team lead and I'm working with people fresh out of graduate school or even undergraduate school who's never really worked a full-time job, I find that it takes a little bit longer because I have to do a lot of training and a lot of, not just learning our methods and procedures, but even how to apply what they've learned in school to the real world. If I'm dealing with experienced people, 3 months max. That would be max.
I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. When I saw this question or heard this question, I was thinking, it's about, I think it's about 2 or 3 months. I've been in the job I've got now for almost 7 years, so it's hard for me to remember, but I know that it was that at least that first semester under my belt before I felt like I was, really part of the team and contributing.
And I'm going to be one to answer my own questions here too, mostly because these questions were given to me to pose to all of you guys too. One of the things I actually found is if I'm in a startup team, so let's say the team was just put together like within a year, then it does take longer. But if it, like you were saying, kind of, some of you were saying, if the team is it's been there for quite some time, it's very established, there's lots of procedures and policies in place, then it is a lot shorter of a time. I've been in a couple startup environments, and I like to think that it takes shorter than it does, but in all reality, looking back, it always takes at least 6 months to a year to really kind of stabilize the team and the foundation and all, the procedures of what you're doing. So. Anybody else have some thoughts on that? All righty, I'm going to skip to the next one here. And if you have any comments too, just feel free to kind of stop me. But I'm sure that we'll kind of, talk through a lot of these things, and a lot of them will start some conversations. So this is a graphic that speaks to what would you say best prepared you to provide these services? So this was for team members only, and this is kind of, let me share this because this is tiny, tiny font. So right here on this side, on the upper right side, it says formal education prepared them is 25%. Right below that, it says on-the-job training was provided by the current employer is 21%. To the left of that is previous experience providing these services is 29%. And then this upper left-hand side, it says other, 26%. So one of the questions that UPCEA asked me is, what is other? Help me understand what this other is, since it's such a huge portion of this pie. So what best prepared you to provide services in the roles that you are currently in? And so I'm just going to open that up to you guys.
And Camille, it looks like we're still seeing the first slide.
Oh, sorry.
At least I am.
Let me actually, let's see. Are you seeing that slide now?
Yes, now we see it.
There we
Thanks.
go. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So any thoughts on that?
This is Alicia here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I sure can.
Did you have a write-in response for that, just out of curiosity?
I think we did. I don't have access to that right now. So I think they wanted us to maybe even talk through some of that. So
yeah, because I think I'd be interested just to know what other people were saying, just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
I would guess that some of that would be informal education. So experience that people have pursued based on every instructional designer I've worked with. We all go out and try and find additional things to learn.
right.
And that would also include any sort of groups like this, like this one right here, where you're talking with other instructional designers. So I think that was kind of a missed opportunity to capture the informal education aspect.
That's true. Any others? I would even like throw in web searches. Like, how many times have I been in conversations, especially because I was an accidental instructional designer, where they were used terms when I'd be secretly looking up on my phone, like, oh yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? And then there's been so many times where that's part of the informal education as well, where you just learn by almost happenstance or stumbling upon things, or wouldn't it be cool if I did something like that? And then spending so much time researching if you could even do something like, you know what I mean? So a lot of that is part of
learning to Google.
Yeah, learning to Google.
Design.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or as I've heard it called, Google foo.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe instructional design couldn't have existed without Google. Maybe that's why it is such a blooming field. Anyway.
I think another area where I pick up, that has prepared me to provide the services I do is just social media in general. I like to follow on Twitter and see what other IDs are doing. So that kind of expands beyond my Johns Hopkins team. I'm able to look and see what people are doing across the country too, just through social media.
I agree.
This is Chris.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'm formally trained, and I've been in the field for over 35 years. And I've done this almost all my adult life. I've been an instructional designer, teacher, faculty member. I think for me, having that foundation really made a big difference. But as technology has changed, as there's been new research that has come out, then I find my special interest groups, publications, just things that I learn from other people. But I wouldn't, that's how I keep current. But I would not say that that's what prepared me. I think what prepared me was actually my education. But once, and I mentioned this before, but once I got my first professional job, I found that I needed to learn business, because that's how, I had to apply what I learned to a business environment. And that you just learn. Nobody taught me. I learned through trial and error, making mistakes and recovering and talking to other people and finding out what they've done. So a lot of informal, but that was after a lot of informal, but I think it's because of my formal education that I was able to figure out what to do and where to go for help.
I love that response. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this? This is all a good conversation. All right, we have a couple more graphs to look at here, so I'm going to jump to the next one. Do you all see the new slide I just put up? Great. So this one is talking a little bit about the average team size. And as you see, there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the team leaders and what they say their team size is versus the team members. And this just might be a variation of the people who responded to the survey. So it's interesting that they say I think most teams are heavy towards the instructional designers. And a lot of teams, actually, it seems, don't even really distinguish between senior and just instructional designers in general. And some have instructional technologists, some have multimedia designers or specialists, and then there's this other again. So it says, so some of the questions that I see here is, there's an average number of new courses and programs launched by teams that have 4 to 6 IDs, 1 IT, 1 multimedia, and around 2 supporting team members. Is a team of 8 to 10 typical for a centralized design staff? That's the question they posed to me. And I thought I'd throw that out there.
Actually, that's a good question. We actually gathered data on that. We had a person on staff who went out and gathered information on across higher education, trying to find the number of instructional design staff across different institutions. I haven't actually looked at the data that he's gotten together yet. So,
cool. If you'd be willing to share that with the community, I'm sure several of us would love to see that.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I guess maybe a question to maybe contextualize this a little bit would be, how many of you are working on teams that are in this category of 8 to 10 currently?
Well, I think the question's kind of interesting because our team at Hopkins is just for the engineering school, but it's 8 to 10. Every once in a while, like once a quarter or so, we have a gathering for instructional designers across the university, and it's like 40 or 50 people. But for just our team, it's like 8 to 10 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too. I'm with Ed at the same place, and we run like our own independent kind of school almost, and I guess that would be decentralized. But at the last place I was at, there were only 3 instructional designers for the whole college. So, and it was a state college versus a university. Did we make that distinction in the survey? Out of curiosity.
Is this centralized versus decentralized?
Or what kind of institution?
Private versus state or something. I'm not sure. I'll have to check. But that's a good note. I'll say the college that I was just at, I'm at USC right now, and it's different, and definitely we don't have 8 to 10 yet. But the college I was just at over at GW, we had about 8 to 10, and we didn't have instructional technologists, but we had multimedia folks, we had IDs, and that was centralized. But I would say that most centralized, it really does depend. I mean, I've seen a lot of centralized services that have been really financially substantiated by the academic administration, and they have vast services that range up to 10 to 15 IDs and, huge teams. But, and then several that, I think this might even be more of a question of centralized versus decentralized staff, and then trying to decipher between then how many team members are on those types of staff teams. But I think typically an 8 to 10, if you're kind of trying to be fully functional and fully sustainable by yourself, I think that's where people try to get to, but it's not always. I don't think it's the average. I would say probably, if I were to guess, maybe the average would be around 5 team members. I don't know. That's my guess, but I don't know. Any other thoughts on this one? All right. Oh, one other question that they asked regarding this graphic was, how many faculty projects do each team member support in a semester? This is a question I get asked a lot, actually.
At our group, it's anywhere from actual active development 6 to 8 courses, but not in a semester. We have I guess it's probably more technically over 2 semesters.
It's about a year or 8 months?
About 8 months is what we designate, but in reality it takes about 10 months. But like on average, based on what information we have available, but we schedule 8 months out for development, and then we have about 6 to 8. I'm saying like where we're actively working on. 8's kind of a high end. And Ed, you want to jump in there because you've been around longer than I have.
Well, I was just going to say the same kind of thing. This question is funny to me because, you know, we would love for our course developments to start at the beginning of a semester and be done at the end of a semester, but that's just not what happens in reality. So it's kind of difficult to quantify this because we sort of have a rolling course load, you know. So we, at the beginning of each semester, we'll get, 3 to 5 new faculty that we start working on their courses, but then we have people that started at the beginning of the previous semester that are carryovers. And so, at any given time, we may have 8 or so projects that we're working on, and each, at the start of each semester, we just get a new set of faculty added on, regardless of where everybody else has finished or not.
I think we work a little bit differently. I'm with the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences and Professional Studies at the College of Medicine. And we're a 2-person team, and we are supporting, I'm going to say 7 programs right now. But how I've structured our instructional design support is that I started off with training the faculty on various aspects of instructional design. And what I do is I created like a worksheet where they would fill in the blanks. I told them what it was that I was looking for. So we had training on writing learning outcomes. And then one of the things on the form, they fill in the learning outcomes. They may not always be perfect, but it's a good start. So we use a collaborative process. And by doing that, we can handle a lot of courses during our semester. That's because our instructors are providing the content, and then my teammate and I, we're the ones that clean it. I always say clean it up, professionalize it, and get it ready for our learning management system, and then upload it into the system and do all the testing of it. When we have a new course, we sit down with that design specification worksheet. We work through all the details, and then we have a procedure for them to submit materials. We have reviews in between. So we handle a lot. Now we're getting ready to go through a revision phase. And I will go through and look at it from an instructional design standpoint. The course director will look at it from a content standpoint, and then we'll decide what revisions that we want. So we do a lot with 2 people. We also do have another group, 2 other groups that we work with on an as-needed basis. We have the people that support the instructional technology, and then we have a group that does the multimedia. So we're able to go to those groups on an as-needed basis.
So you said that you're able to take more on. Do you have maybe a ballpark number of how many you would, let's say in a year, take on as a one person?
Well, that's hard for me to say because we're coming to the end of getting the last courses developed, and was over like a 4-year period. And so we probably have about 20 something odd courses, 26 courses.
For that 4-year period?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And we're working on electives. It may be more than that. I've never added it up before, but I'm just thinking about, each of the programs and what their courses are like. So I'm going to say under 30, but definitely more than like 25. So someplace between 25 and 30.
Impressive. Thanks for sharing. Would anybody else like to share? All right, well, we'll scooch on ahead to our next slide. We have 2 more. This one is talking, this is from the question, what professional development topics are the most valuable or interesting to you for your role? And then we thought that this was interesting given the fact that, so the orange is the team members and the blue is the team leaders. There was some discrepancies between the two. So the question that they've asked me to pose is, which topics are the most critical or the hardest to find professional development on? So we found that there's a real need. So some of the team members were saying adult learning is really what I'd want to do. But maybe I guess the question is there professional development already on adult learning out there, or do we really need to create some professional development around that? So that's the question for you. Maybe I can pose that one more time since I was talking so much. So which topics are the most critical out of these listed, and maybe there's some that aren't? And which topics are the hardest to find professional development on?
I mean, looking at the topics here for our group, I'd say the biggest one is the accessibility, just because it's becoming such a big part of our jobs recently. I wouldn't say that's of most interest, as the question asks, for me personally, but and then adult learning theory, to me that is kind of like, I don't really necessarily know that the theory itself is valuable without some kind of application of that theory. So maybe like strategies on how to encourage adult learning theory in practice, like how to incorporate that into the course development process.
I like it, thanks.
With respect to the adult learning theory and practice, for me, I'd like to know what the latest research is and application of that research. So it's a little bit more than just a theory and practice. I think you can find that. You can Google that. But I think the application of new research, especially when it comes to technology in particular, using that in your actual instructional design, how to apply it.
Great, no, good suggestion. Back to the accessibility comment, I think that was an interesting comment, mostly because most people, I think, kind of, especially, I think that team leaders know that that's a necessity, but everybody kind of groans when they have to go through accessibility training. So I'm almost wondering if there's professional development that needs to be on this, but in a way that would be really engaging and actually interesting, because most people I know, they know this is necessary, but they really kind of struggle sitting through the section 508 of, listening through all of the different rules and regulations about that. So just a thought.
Well, I think that's a challenge, is that is reframing that accessibility issue, because I'm our university's digital accessibility chair, and so one thing I've found is nobody really gets super jazzed about ADA compliance.
Right.
But people do get jazzed about universal design for learning.
Yes.
So it's retooling and reframing. And I think that's also part of it as an instructional designer, is helping is getting people on the same page and helping instructional designers to understand what terminology to use. Because if they go in and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to make your course ADA compliant, or I'm going to help you make your course ADA compliant, faculty's like, okay, well, that sounds boring. But if it's like, hey, we want to, look at this for universal design for learning, and, how do we get this to meet multiple needs of multiple students, that's a lot more exciting. And I think it's also more exciting to take part in as a workshop and learn about. Yeah, so it's both more valuable in that context and it's more interesting.
Good point, Tara.
And just to piggyback on that, we just put out a needs assessment for our faculty to kind of figure out where we're going to go with our training in the future. And I purposely put under that, I did a design section, and I purposely put universal design for learning and then accessibility for, I did them as separate categories just to see what the response would be, because we're talking about the very same issue. We don't want to frame it like this very dry subject. So it's going to be interesting to see what the faculty, which ones they check.
Oh yeah, let us know. That'd be actually interesting.
Here at Drexel, we've had many workshops on accessibility. And I have heard all the horror cases and who got sued and why and all of that. And for me, that doesn't make me any difference. What I need, I know some of this already, but what the people that I work with need, they need to know what to do. So if we're saying that we want the courses to be accessible, what do I need to do? All the theory and reading more is not helping anybody. So we started with what a friend of mine who was spearheading one of the projects here at Drexel with the low-hanging fruit. So we get people to use alt text, okay? And when we put in an image, we want a description. When we put in a hyperlink, we want to put it in a particular way. And so we have 5 to 7 things that we just do. And then I take their syllabi and run it through the accessibility wizard in Word or in Adobe. So having skills to know how to do certain things to make your courses accessible helps you somewhat meet the requirements, but you're not sitting there listening to, all of the, which code and which cases, because that's not helping me. It's not helping me get my job done.
Yeah, exactly.
So just tell me what I need to do, show me how to do it, and then, we'll try our best to do it. My faculty just hated having to put in alt text. And so we got to the point where if we can do it for them, we can, but I can't talk about the context of an image because I'm not a scientist, so I can't do that. So we do the best that we can. And then we try to use as much closed captioning as we can, but it's very expensive. And if you have lecture material that's changing every semester or every academic year, it's just too expensive.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that. It's like, give me an action item list. Let's move on this. Yeah.
I think that's why last summer we did a series of, we hosted a series of webinars. So I gathered all sorts of webinars that I found on ADA issues. And the most popular webinar series that we had there was one series that was just those practical things. It's like so it was they were 30-minute sessions. One of them was like, how do you make a table compliant? How do you make a Word document compliant? How do you do, and it wasn't going into here's all the rules and everything. It was, here's how to do it. And that's it. And
Yep.
Yeah. Those were way, way more popular. Yeah.
No, that's really good. And maybe what we can do at some of the conferences or mini sessions we have is just say, okay, everybody bring your computers. We're going to show you how to do it. I mean, that to me is practical professional development. I want to leave with a skill, so.
Well, that's actually, I submitted a proposal for a conference to do exactly that in the fall.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And one of the things that, just to comment on the what's hardest to find professional development on, there's a lot of conferences, and this is what I'm trying to kind of switch modes of conferencing, in UPCEA, or just in instructional design conferencing as well. Like, because there's a lot of conferences we sit and listen to, and there's total purpose for that, right? But I think it's really hard to find conferences that I go to and learn a new skill, because there's so many skills to be learned in the instructional design field that, I remember going to a conference specifically to think, like, I wanted to be trained in mobile learning. I wanted to have that new skill. And I was so disappointed when I learned it, because I just sat there and listened to somebody else talk about it. So, like, again, I think that there's definitely practical skills we can train on as for professional development topics. And then there's definitely more scholarly topics that we can talk to and learn more from, and kind of see what the latest and greatest is. So anyway, that's my feedback. But any other comments on that? Alrighty, well, we're running up real close to the deadline. I'm just going to show you this last slide and ask this last question here. So this is the frequency of professional development determined by the cost or the number of opportunities. So it looks like the general population, which isn't probably a surprise to all of us, the frequency of professional development opportunities is determined by the cost. Others by the number is 23%, and then other is 20. So so UPCEA is asking me, what is the sweet spot for professional development? How much is too much for a conference? So what's the sweet spot pricing? What is, like, they don't want to charge too much. So what's the sweet spot? Any thoughts on this?
I know at Hopkins, we're pretty fortunate with our particular program. They don't really look much at cost. Actually, they just give us a set number. So each fiscal year we can take, two trips, 2 conference trips, and we could probably even justify a third if we could argue. But so the cost, the registration fees for the ones that I usually attend are right around the $500 mark, I would say.
Yeah, and I think regarding the third one, the cost might determine justification for a third one. Like, if it's a 2-day thing that's like, less than a normal conference, then we probably would get away with getting it approved, don't you think?
Yeah.
That's awesome. At most of the schools I've been on, it's a set budget. So if I can find a couple conferences, kind of similar to what you had actually just said, is if I can find a couple conferences that are fairly cheaper, I might be able to go to 2 or more. But that really does come down to cost. So I think I was generally given a budget with travel and everything included to be about $2,100 or something, or $2,000, something like that. So it really just does depend on what I can get for that. But generally, I'd always end up getting about 1 conference in, and maybe like a virtual session somewhere. So.
Real quick, before we wrap up here, I did want to quickly mention that UPCEA is holding this a webinar to take a deeper dive on these topics that's covered by this survey. And I just wanted to I put a link in the chat, but for the people that might be watching this video at a later time, I just wanted to put that link on the screen here so that it's captured in the video.
Yeah, I will stop sharing my screen. Right.
I think that takes away the link that I was putting on, but that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Let me just, I'm just going to switch to a whiteboard here real quick and put that link on.
Okay. And just so you know, while Ed's doing this, this is for the entire UPCEA community, not just eDesign. So all even including kind of the inclusive deans and provosts and everybody else who's interested in this.
Yep. So I think, for people that are watching this video later, they can pause the video and scribble down that URL. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you all there. Are there any last questions or comments before we wrap up for today?
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody, and be sure to spread the word to your instructional design and multimedia colleagues. We'd love to see as many people as possible come out to these each month. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.